Have you ever sat quietly and wondered, when did everything between me and my children change? You spent years raising them, changing diapers, staying up all night, guiding them through difficulties and challenges. You gave up weekends, vacations, even your own dreams to help their dreams come true. Now, when you speak, they interrupt. When you advise, they ignore it. When you need help, they are suddenly too busy. Worst of all, you feel as if you have become invisible. If that feeling is familiar, please know that you are not alone. Many parents reach a point in their lives when roles begin to change. You were once the protector, the teacher, the person they ran to with everything. But now it feels like they have stopped looking at you that way. Sometimes they treat you more like an annoyance than a guide. Or worse, they make you feel like a burden. Today I will share simple but powerful things you can start doing right now that can change the way your children perceive and treat you. Not through arguments, but through quiet strength, calm boundaries, and self-respect. The ancients taught that you cannot control the actions of others, but you completely control your own reactions. Respect cannot be demanded. It can only be inspired by the way we live. Let's start with something that might touch your heart. Trying to please them too much. Have you ever said yes when you really wanted to say no just to keep the peace? Or gone out of your way to do something for your children, even when it made you feel uncomfortable, just so they wouldn't be upset? Many parents do this without realizing it. Maybe you've arranged time to babysit even when you weren't feeling well, only for them to speak to you in a tone that made you feel sick to your stomach and blush. But here's what's important for you to understand. The more you chase their approval, the less respect you will receive. It's not because they are ungrateful or mean, but because human nature tends to change over time, according to the pressures of society. There was a woman I once met, Eleanor. She raised 3 children with everything she had, but as she got older, she began to give in more and more. She let them make decisions about her house, her health, even her money. "I just want to keep the family together," she said. But the more she gave in, the more they stopped listening. She thought she was being kind. What they saw was someone they no longer needed to treat seriously. You see, respect doesn't come from the sacrifice. It comes from self-respect. When you start putting yourself second in everything, you silently teach those around you that your voice, your needs, your time are not as important. And people react to that message. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Self-respect is a source of all other respect." That's not just ancient philosophy. It's a timeless truth. When Eleanor continued to give in, her children didn't see compassion. They saw weakness. Not maliciously, but they began to see her as a satellite orbiting their lives, not as the center of her own. Eleanor's story is repeated in millions of families every day. Parents think that by giving in, they're showing love. But in reality, they are teaching their children that boundaries can be violated, that their parents' respect and voice can be ignored. It's a harsh lesson, but a necessary one. So, if this sounds familiar, let me be clear. It's time to stop bowing down. It's okay to say no. It's okay to set limits. You are allowed to speak up when something isn't right. You are allowed to take up space. And you don't need anyone's permission to do it. Respect starts with you. The more you honor your own boundaries, the more others will honor them too. That doesn't mean being rude. It just means showing your children that your time, energy, and presence are valuable, and you're not afraid to stand tall in your truth. But there's another mistake many parents make when they feel disrespected, and that is reacting with anger instead of purposeful calm. When someone speaks to us in a demeaning way, the first instinct is often to push back. You want to say, "How dare you speak to me like that?" Or, "Do you remember everything I've done for you?" And while that reaction might be justified, it often doesn't change anything. In fact, it often adds fuel to the fire. Here's what can truly change your experience. Stop arguing, start leading. When you react to disrespect with anger or an emotional outburst, it shows that the other person still has control over your inner peace. But when you react with calm, measured confidence, it sends a completely different message. It says, "I don't need to raise my voice. I know who I am." Let me tell you about James, a retired teacher I knew. In the classroom, students had respected him for decades. But at home, his adult children hardly listened. They talked over him, dismissed his concerns, even ridiculed his ideas. Initially, James objected. Every conversation became an argument. Every disagreement ended in shouting, and still nothing changed. Then something shifted. James decided to stop fighting. He still shared his thoughts, but calmly, without trying to win. He stopped chasing respect and started embodying it. He carried himself like a man who no longer had anything to prove. And a strange thing happened. His children started to notice. They started to listen more. Not because he shouted louder, but because he stopped playing that old game. Lao Tzu taught, "Water conquers stone not because it is hard, but because it is persistent and flexible." One evening, James's son interrupted him mid-story about his old job. Instead of exploding as he used to, James just paused. He looked at his son, smiled faintly, and said, "You seem to have something important to say. I'm listening." That calmness, that quiet confidence, had more impact than years of arguing. His son, for the first time in years, actually looked into his father's eyes. "No, Dad, I'm sorry for interrupting. Please continue." It was in that moment that James realized, you don't need to fight for respect. You just need to live it. Let calmness be your strength. Let your tone carry your power. You don't need to convince your children of your worth. They will feel it in your presence. But there's another truth that can feel heavy, yet also liberating. You don't need your children to complete you emotionally. That doesn't mean you don't love them deeply. Of course you do, but the more you depend on them to feel valued, the more the dynamic shifts in the wrong direction. People, including our own children, respect those who are emotionally independent. When your sense of happiness, your sense of peace, comes within, not from how many times they call, how sweet they are, or how much they do for you, they begin to see you differently. Not as someone clinging to the past, but as someone with a rich and meaningful life of their own. I remember Rosa, a beautiful soul who gave everything for her children. But when they grew up and moved away, she was shattered. She waited by the phone. She called every day. She reminded them of her longing, and they began to pull away. She didn't understand. She was giving love. Why weren't they reciprocating? Rosa's calls became a burden instead of a joy. Her children started to see her name appear on their phones and sigh. Not because they didn't love her, but because they felt the pressure of carrying her emotions. Rosa had turned motherly love into emotional dependence. She needed them to feel whole, and children can sense that. It's too heavy a burden for any child to bear. Then one day, after a particularly difficult call where her daughter said, "Mom, I need space to breathe," Rosa decided to change. She decided to focus on herself, not out of anger or revenge, but because she realized her children couldn't and shouldn't be her sole source of happiness. She joined a dance class she had always wanted to try. She met friends for lunch, conversations that didn't revolve around her children. She started reading books again, novels she once loved but had neglected during years of parenting. She started painting again, a hobby she had given up when she became a mother. She started laughing again, not a forced laugh to hide sadness, but a genuine laugh from the heart. And do you know what happened? Her phone started ringing more. But this time, her children called because they wanted to, not out of guilt. Her daughter said, "Mom, you seem so happy. What have you been up to?" Her son started asking about her dance class, about the painting she was creating. They missed her, not just her attention, because now she wasn't chasing their presence. She was attracting it simply by living fully. Rosa had discovered a secret many parents never learn. Children want their parents to be happy, but they don't want to be responsible for that happiness. When you have your own life, your own interests, your own joys, you become someone your children want to be around, not someone they feel they have to be around. That's the difference between magnetism and desperation. Magnetism attracts. Desperation repels. So if you felt that pang in your chest when they don't call, or that quiet sadness when they don't visit, remind yourself, your worth doesn't come from the amount of attention they give you. It comes from within you. And the more you tend to that inner light, the more people will be naturally drawn to it respectfully and consistently. This leads us to another crucial part of reclaiming respect: boundaries. Strong, clear, loving boundaries. Boundaries are not about walls or shutting people out. They are about teaching others how to treat you. And believe it or not, many adult children cross boundaries not because they are intentionally disrespectful, but because the boundaries were never clearly defined in the first place. Think about it. If your children constantly interrupt you, make big decisions without your input, or speak to you in a tone that makes you feel small, it might not be because they are cruel. It might be because at some point, these behaviors were allowed and never corrected, not out of weakness, but perhaps out of love or desire to avoid conflict. But here's the problem. Love without boundaries can turn into resentment, and silence over time becomes permission. Let me tell you about William. He was a proud, retired businessman, confident in every boardroom, respected by everyone he ever worked with. But at home with his adult children, things were different. They cut him off mid-sentence. They rolled their eyes when he offered advice. They spoke to him as if he didn't know how to live his own life. At first, he let it slide. It's not worth arguing, he thought. They're just stressed or tired. But every time he stayed silent, they pushed further. Until one day at dinner, as William was sharing a memory from his youth, his son suddenly said, "Dad, can you stop with the old stories? We've heard them a million times." The room fell silent. William's wife looked down at her plate. His daughter continued to look at her phone. But William felt something snap inside his chest, not because of the words, but because of the utter disrespect behind them. That night, after everyone had gone to their rooms, William sat alone in the kitchen and made a decision. The following week, at the next family dinner, when his son started to interrupt him again, William paused. He looked his son directly in the eye, his voice calm but firm. "You don't have to agree with everything I say, but I expect to be spoken to respectfully. If that's not possible, I will remove myself from the conversation. No shouting, no drama, just quiet clarity. This is a standard. This is what I allow in my presence." William's son, for the first time in years, actually heard. He looked at his father, truly looked, and saw not a weak man begging for attention, but a man of dignity demanding what he deserved. "You're right, Dad," the son said, his voice softer than usual. "I'm sorry." And from that night on, things began to change. Not overnight, but gradually. William's children started to watch their tone. They started to wait for him to finish speaking before offering their opinions. They started to ask his advice on important decisions. Boundaries are not about control. They are about clarity. And when your boundaries are clear, everyone in your life, including your children, starts to show up differently. They recognize that your time, your energy, and your company are valuable, not guaranteed, not an obligation, but to be cherished. Now, there's another pattern that often gets overlooked, and this one can be particularly hard for parents. It's the habit of constantly giving without appreciation. You know what I'm talking about. You offer to help. You give advice. You give your time, your energy, sometimes even your money, because that's what you've always done. And maybe in your heart, you're not even doing it to get anything back. But it still hurts when it goes unnoticed. When they don't say thank you, when they expect it, when they take and take, but never stop to ask how you are. It's natural to want to give. That instinct doesn't disappear with age. But here's the thing. When you keep giving without boundaries or acknowledgement, you don't teach them to love you more. You teach them to expect more. And slowly, your generosity becomes background noise, something they don't even see anymore. Benjamin, a father of 3, was always a helper. He lent money without hesitation. Showed up anytime they needed help moving or fixing something. Even in his 70s, he would rearrange his doctor's appointments just to babysit at the last minute. "Family is everything," he used to say. "I'll do anything for my kids." But year after year, Benjamin started to notice something. His children called when they needed something. They didn't call just to see how he was. His weekends were always filled with requests for help, babysitting, car repairs, loans for home renovations. He couldn't remember the last time he was invited to a family dinner where he didn't have to do something. Then came the day Benjamin had minor surgery for a polyp. Nothing serious, but the doctor recommended someone stay with him the first night for observation. Benjamin called his eldest. "Oh, Dad, I have a crucial project deadline." The second was out of town on business. The youngest had long-standing weekend plans. Benjamin lay alone in the hospital that night, staring at the ceiling and wondered, "What did I do wrong?" That moment broke something in him, but instead of bitterness, it brought an awakening. He realized he had created children who took his help for granted, not because they were bad people, but because he had never taught them to appreciate it. He was always there, always available, always saying yes. So why would they ever think about him having needs of his own? From that hospital bed, Benjamin made a quiet but firm decision. No more automatic yes. The following week, when his daughter called asking him to babysit so she could go on a weekend date, Benjamin said, "Honey, I love the grandkids, but I have plans with friends this weekend." For the first time in 20 years, he said no. His daughter was silent for a moment, then said, "Oh, okay, Dad, we'll find someone else." When his son asked for a loan to fix his car, Benjamin said, "Son, I can help with part of it, but you'll need to cover the rest. And let's set up a clear repayment plan." At first, his children were confused, even annoyed. They were used to him always being there, always giving without expecting anything in return. But a strange thing happened. As Benjamin started setting boundaries around his generosity, his children started showing more gratitude. When he helped, they said thank you genuinely. When he lent money, they paid it back on time. When he babysat, they asked how he was doing. Because the help was no longer expected, it was valued. Benjamin had learned an important lesson. When you pull back just enough to let others feel the weight of your absence, they start to appreciate your presence again. This leads us to a core truth many parents forget. You are not just a parent. You are a human being with your own life, dreams, time, and identity. And one of the most empowering, healing things you can do for your children and for yourself is to build a life that exists outside of them. I know that might sound strange at first. Maybe you've spent decades putting your family first. Maybe you told yourself, "I'll start taking care of myself when the kids are settled." But now they're grown and you're in this next season of life. Ask yourself, what fills your cup? Here's what happens when your children see that you are living, not just waiting. They admire you. They are drawn to you and they respect you, not because they feel guilty, but because they see someone who radiates dignity and purpose. You are not here just to serve them. You are here to live fully, to rediscover parts of yourself that may have been put on hold. Whether it's taking a class, starting a new hobby, traveling, reconnecting with old friends, or simply enjoying your mornings at your own pace, you are allowed to prioritize your own joy. And when you do, something beautiful happens. Your children begin to see you not just as mom or dad, but as a whole, vibrant human being, someone with their own story, their own strength, their own light. They start to become curious about your life, about what makes you laugh, about the dreams you're pursuing. I remember Maria, 68, who had spent 40 years as a mother and wife. When her husband passed away and her children had families of their own, she felt lost. "I didn't know who I was if I wasn't someone's mother or someone's wife," she confessed. But instead of sinking into sadness, Maria decided to explore. She signed up for piano lessons, something she'd always wanted to do, but never had time for. She joined a local walking group. She started a blog about her family's heirloom recipes. Slowly, Maria found herself again, not Maria the mother or Maria the wife, but simply Maria. And her children started calling more, not out of guilt, but out of curiosity. "How are the piano lessons, Mom? How many readers does your blog have? Is the walking group fun?" They wanted to share life with someone who had an interesting life, not with someone who was just waiting for theirs. Now, as you've begun to shift how you carry yourself, to speak up when needed, to set healthy limits, and let go of old expectations, you may start to notice something powerful. The tension begins to ease. The weight on your chest feels lighter. You're no longer walking on eggshells or hoping for scraps of appreciation. You are standing tall again. Not because your children have changed overnight, but because you have. And that's the heart of it. Respect isn't something we force from others. It's something we quietly inspire by how we live. And the moment you begin to live with more self-regard, everything else starts to fall into place. Let's repeat something simple but often forgotten. You matter, not because of what you give, not because of how much you've done, but simply because you are. And the world and your family need the version of you that feels confident, clear, and calm. The version that doesn't shrink to keep the peace, but stands in her truth with love. That version changes everything. You might be surprised how your children start to respond. Maybe they call a little more often. Maybe they speak a little more gently. Maybe they start asking for your opinion and actually listening. These things are not just coincidences. This is the ripple effect of you reclaiming your place in the relationship, not through demands or guilt, but through presence, dignity, and self-worth. But even if they don't respond immediately, please don't be discouraged. Sometimes people need time to adjust. They've gotten used to the version of you that always said yes, stayed silent, or gave endlessly without asking for anything in return. When you start to change that dynamic, it can be uncomfortable for them and even for you at first. But that discomfort is part of growth, and it's worth it. Remember, love and respect are not the same thing. You can love your children deeply and still set limits. You can care for them with all your heart and still say, I will not be spoken to that way. That's not harsh. That's healthy. That's what real, grown-up relationships look like. So, here's the question I want you to gently ask yourself today. Where am I still giving away my power? Is it in how you always say yes, even when you want to say no? Is it in how you stay silent when your voice deserves to be heard? Or maybe it's in how you wait for their approval to feel good about yourself. Wherever it is, start there. Make one small shift. Maybe it's saying, I have other plans today, but I'd love to see you another time. Maybe it's telling your son or daughter, I deserve to be spoken to respectfully, or this conversation can wait. Maybe it's taking that trip you've put off, joining that new group, or starting that hobby you've delayed. Small steps. That's all it takes. And please don't think you have to be perfect. You don't have to get it right every time. What matters is that you begin. Seneca wrote, every new day is a chance to become a better version of ourselves. You are never too old to reclaim your voice, never too late to rebuild respect, and never too far from the love and peace you truly deserve. If this message resonates with you, if you've ever sat with that quiet pain of feeling overlooked or disrespected by your own children, I want to say this from the heart. You deserve better, not because of what you've done in the past, but because of who you are right now. Now, I would love to hear from you. Have you experienced moments when your children spoke to you without the respect you hoped for? Have you tried setting boundaries or pulling back emotionally? What has helped you the most? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Please leave a comment below, even if it's just a few words. And if you found this video helpful or healing in any way, please give it a like. It really helps others find this kind of content. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell so you always know when we post more videos to support, uplift, and walk alongside you. Living with dignity is the most powerful message you will ever send. Thank you for spending this time with me. You are worthy, you are strong, and you are not alone.